When did you start doing QT?
I think about 15 months ago now. I started
Okay.
with Cherie in like March of 2021. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so about 15 months.
Okay. So when you came in, um, what were you bumping up against um, when
Um,
you started?
the biggest thing for me was really bad um, issues with my career. I had like started my own company when I was 23 and was 7 years in on that at that time, and um, was just really burnt out and kind of felt like I couldn't get out of it. Um, and then aside from that, I had also recently been diagnosed with seizure disorder, and had a string of seizures between 2018 and 2021, um, roughly like 1 to 2 a year over that period. So I was really stressed out about not being able to drive my vehicle for 6 months each time I had a seizure, which affected work. And um, then I also have an autoimmune disease that is called sarcoidosis. So that was really stressful. I started to have flare ups of that. So I kind of knew a lot of these different things were tied to stress, and I wasn't really getting any treatment protocol from going to doctors about it all. Like I had medicines that were prescribed. I was seeing a different therapist first. I was seeing a psychiatrist, and kind of was just burnt out on trying to feel better at that point, and kind of just wanted to give up. So
That was you answered my next question. Was like if you had any diagnoses. So you were dealing with a lot.
yeah, definitely.
Um, so what was it like going through QT? Just a session of QT.
Yeah.
Would you describe what that was like?
Um, I think getting started with it, to be honest, it felt like very kind of like hippy dippy or like woo woo spiritual from coming from the way Cherie described it. And initially I was like, all right, I'm gonna give it a full shot. Like I'm not gonna write it off in my head going into it. Like I'm gonna actually like try what she's asking of me. Um, and I think like the first time I did an actual jump, the experience was so intense that afterwards I was like, okay, I do actually have PTSD, because I've kind of always had the mindset of like whatever I went through wasn't really that traumatic. So it's always felt like I'm like maybe in a way belittling someone else's experience that anecdotally was what much worse than mine, for me to say that I have this same thing and this same ailment that they do or whatever. Um, so I've kind of always just had the mindset of like I had a great childhood. I don't have anything to complain about. There was nothing really messed up about me. Um, and really kind of learned like there's a lot of things about the way that I behave that I'm not really happy with, and it's not in alignment with how I want to show up in the world. And there's still plenty of room to change that. So I think like I was definitely stuck in the mindset of like, this is who I am. Like, I'm just going to have to deal with that. I am an obsessive compulsive person. I am somebody that overthinks my relationships, and just kind of like a lot of these behaviors that I think were learned through family dynamics. Um, just felt like that those were defining of me, along with these different diagnoses that I have. Is I'm a person with seizure disorder and stuff like that. um, right now I actually haven't had a seizure in over 19 months. So now it's to a point where like I fill out medical forms and I'm like, oh yeah, and I do have seizure disorder, as opposed to like I would be like, just so you guys know, like if I was going on a ski trip or something, like just so you guys know I have seizure disorder, so I could could fall out while we're on the ski lift here. And it's just kind of just always was not a good mood or vibe set by those statements. But I was, it was at the forefront of my mind because I had that diagnosis, and it was very defining of what I could and couldn't do. I'm not safe. It's not safe for me to drive. You guys need to drive. So, but I think at this point, like, I've kind of gotten past a lot of those different definitions, and they're like not even really on my mind. So
Would you say that the seizures ending is one of the biggest ways that your life is different after doing QT, or just one of them?
I would say one of the like most obvious tangible impacts is the medical side of things. I haven't had a seizure in the longest period since I got diagnosed. And last year, I was going through a big like sarcoidosis breakout and had welts all over my arm again, and signs of sarcoidosis in my internal organs. So had to go through a whole nother big round of testing and everything. And by the time it took about 3 months to go through the testing. By the time that was all done, everything had pretty much cleared up on its own, just from the behavioral changes that I was making along the way. And I think a big part that I lacked in other counseling and other therapy models, because I was trying to feel better for a good 5 years leading into this. So I had worked with 4 different counselors, wasn't really happy with them. Me and my wife, Tara, had seen marriage counselors, wasn't really happy with the advice I was getting from them. So this kind of felt like the last stop on the track, if that makes sense, of like, okay, I've seen a psychiatrist, I'm on these pills. I was super resistant to taking antidepressants for years and years. And I was like, I mean, it can't get any worse than it is now, so I might as well give in and get on these pills. So I had basically done like everything that I felt like I could. And I think through all of it, what was missing was like personal accountability behind it all. Like accepting responsibility for, the stake that I have in these feelings, in these emotions that you're, ultimately are your lens for everything that you're doing in your life. So I think like that was one of the big things where the QT process is very inviting and it feels very safe. But at the point where it needs to get a little bit harder, it gets hard. So, and I think like that's not present in EMDR and CBT and different behavioral therapy practices, because I tried those things and I felt like a lot of the systems I was given throughout those processes revolved around blocking out all these things that were hard for me to handle, of like, maybe you don't need that person in your life, maybe they're not the right person for you, and maybe just building systems around the way that you feel instead of learning how to process your feelings better and be okay with the way that things are, if that makes sense. So like yeah, I mean, like, the most tangible thing is, health, but from like the outside of like what other people can't see, like everything else in my life has changed. My marriage has gotten a lot better. I'm a lot more, I have better relationships with pretty much every member of my family as a result of this. And I have better relationships with my business partners. I went through a partial acquisition of a company, actually bought my childhood home from my parents during that process so that I could move back home and be closer to my family. So, in the 15 months that I've been doing this, basically every part of my life has changed. I own a house. I live somewhere else. I'm spending way more time with my friends and family than I have in the last decade. I'm in the happiest place I've been in with my wife in the 4 years that we've been married. So, and the 9 years that we've been together, we both agree like this is the best it's ever been. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot that has changed from going through this process. So
Awesome. A lot of practical changes and health changes, and I definitely relate to the piece about, this helped me take responsibility. I really felt like she was my companion, but I was doing it, but she was walking alongside me. And
yeah.
I definitely agree with that piece that you shared. So what are some things that your friends and family have said or noticed, maybe early on or even now, that you attributed to having done QT?
I think the biggest thing that my wife has noticed is me being more present, just as a whole. That's always been a big issue for us with me being a business owner. I was always getting phone calls at night, or I had issues going on with projects that felt really pressing. So I would be losing sleep at night or waking up really early to go start working 3 hours before the day starts so that I can get ahead of these issues or whatever. That kind of put me in a spot where I was just very disconnected and distant from our relationship together, and wasn't really adding much value to the time that we spent together because I wasn't fully present. So I think just being able to be more present and focused in pretty much all things that I'm doing, that's affected my career situation, that's affected my relationship with my wife. I think other people have just noticed in general, like, back to a place where I like to have a lot of fun. Like, prior to starting my business, I had multiple bands, I played a lot of music, I've always been into aggressive sports like snowboarding and skateboarding and mountain biking and stuff like that. And somewhere along the way, all those things just weren't really that fun anymore. I would still go do them, but it felt more mechanical of like, if I don't go do these things, I'm just going to feel worse. So I need to go check these off the list and go do these things. Now I feel like I'm more just like legitimately doing fun things because they're fun to do and I find joy in them, not because it's like I have to try and squeeze some joy out of this experience so all this other stuff that sucks doesn't suck so bad. So
Right. I'm finding it hard to like not go and make little side comments, but if I do that, it'll revert the camera to me.
sure.
So that's why I've been like absolutely silent as you're answering, but I wanted to
you're good.
say or ad-libbing and stuff in the background. So would you say your journey has been successful?
Definitely. I would definitely say this journey has been successful. I've told at least 100 people that meeting Cherie has changed my life, and I have tried to get other family members to engage with this process. I've recommended it to other colleagues in business that I know struggle with a lot of the same things I was butting up against. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely had a major positive impact for me.
Awesome. Well, that's all the set questions I had, but if there was anything else, any other thoughts or anything else you wanted to mention, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my favorite parts about how Cherie has updated the programs is the increased accessibility of it. What I see a lot of people struggle with counseling is the systems around our current world of counseling revolve around a fixed price per appointment that most people can't afford at the pace that they need it when they're in need. So like, I've seen this with my sister, for example, where if you can only afford 2 sessions a month, that's only 24 sessions a year. And if you could instead do 2 sessions a week, well, then 4 weeks from now, we're in month 4 of the other version. So then, my sister and what she's currently doing versus if she was working with QT right now would most likely have 4 times the speed in terms of impact and change. And that's ultimately like what I've felt from it is, past therapy sessions would result in me kind of opening a can of worms and then walking away and being really confused about that can of worms for about a month, and then coming back and just kind of stirring that can around again and then go back and take it back home. And this feels a lot more like you're closing the cans and putting them away, and you don't have to come back to it unless it's, has value and there's something there for you to look at it and said can. But I don't know if that analogy adds up, but it's definitely much faster than any of the other things that I tried along the way. So
Really good points. And how we have, like, you can access us in between, because I never experienced that either.
Yeah.
In a severe emergency, I guess I could have called the counselor, but I didn't really feel like they were accessible, even if I, it's like
Totally.
can't access them until that next appointment. And like you
Yeah.
said, to the cost, it would be like once a week or once a month.
Yeah. Yeah. It just becomes kind of unobtainable for a lot of people. So yeah, I mean, that's like one of my favorite things.
You said, how you experienced the session showed you that you do have or did have PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Any other general thoughts about just what like an average session is like, or
yeah,
how you come in versus how you show up after it's done?
Yeah.
I mean, I know they all build on each other and the process, but
yeah, I feel like my general path was not the common loop that people are in. I feel like with Cherie, where like I had so much tangible physical things that needed to change, like not just roadblocks, but like actual things in my life that were really like, this job is overwhelming, you don't want to do it anymore, but you're the owner of the company, so like that's not you don't just go in and quit your job and go get another job on that one. You got to build a whole team around you, transition it, keep from letting all the clients down, just so I feel like my journey was more like do a couple jumps, have some big realizations, and then apply what we learned from that. Okay, and now that thing's out of the way, let's go do a couple more jumps. Now let's go apply that. So it's kind of like I went one by one, if that makes sense, of like chopping away at, okay, like why do I constantly feel like I'm in trouble? Why do I not accept myself for my cannabis usage? Why, and like kind of just going back through all those different traumatic experiences and recognizing like, okay, now that that's out of the way, this other part that I couldn't find the answer for, now it's really clear what I need to do about this in my life. So so it was a little bit different, I feel like, where I think the typical path is a lot more like go through a bunch of experiences and then kind of sum it up from there. Whereas I think mine was more like, I don't know, like I feel like probably 70% of my sessions with Cherie were like not actually jumps and focus on PTSD. It was more like the mechanics of applying what we had learned. So
yeah, learning how to live differently, because really the jumping is a small piece. I mean, it is important, but it's just a small piece. So
yeah, and I get that now, like seeing my wife go through the process and stuff. It's like everybody has different styles and approaches to the way that they live, even. So like in my case, I've always like been like go go go, like let's take action now. So for me it was like I didn't want to stay in that space of exploring and learning and then go figure it out. I was like, okay, what can I do right now with that piece of information? So I'm kind of glad it worked out that way, because I don't think things would have ended up the way they are otherwise, because it was like piece by piece where we first figured out, okay, I don't like this job. How can I go about that? Maybe I could sell the company. Oh, that's not going to work because any of these people I'm talking to about buying the company expect me to work there full time for 3 or 4 years. Okay, well, maybe you know somebody else that could buy a part of the company. Maybe you don't have to sell the whole thing. And okay, maybe we could do that. Put that deal together. Okay, now I want to move back home. Well, there's no houses available back home, and my mom had back surgery and they kind of want to get out of their house. So like literally kind of manifesting those situations along the way of like, how am I going to get back home? And that kind of snowballing up into, well, now that I sold the company, I could actually buy my parents' house, and now they can go get the better suited property for their current state of life. I can be set up to have kids now, which is the next step for me and Tara. So like kind of did this kind of crazy shell game over the last 15 months of like, get this out of the way and then do this thing, and then now get this out of the way and now do this thing and then get this out of the way, and so on. So so it's been a crazy period for sure for us.
Well, I really appreciate your time, Adam. This is going to be, you know, being able to use this footage, you know, and share with others is really just will give a more personal reflection for people to be like, oh, okay, real people, real results.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally, yeah.
So, yeah, unless you can think of anything else, I think you really got to the heart of what it's done for you and how you feel about it.
Yeah, I feel good.
We'll make it look good. Oh, you know.
What'd you say?
As far as how we clip it and present you, you know.
Sure.
Appreciate you being willing to let us put it out there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I definitely don't mind anyone hearing my thoughts on all of this. So.
All right, Adam. Well, you have a good rest of your day, and yeah, thanks again.
Thanks. You too. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.